Boomers are leaving America at record rates. The American dream has become leaving America. In early 2025, U.S. expat numbers surged 102%. That's not a typo. Double. 40% of women and girls between ages 15 and 44 said they'd permanently move abroad if given the opportunity. That was only 10% in 2014. Something broke. I'm not talking about politics or culture wars. I'm talking about a system where the math stopped mathing, where a generation that built the richest country on earth is now calculating whether they can afford to die here. The people who invented the modern suburb, who paid into Social Security for 40 years, who believed the deal was real, are now Googling cost of living in Portugal at 2 in the morning. This isn't about beaches and adventure. This is about your 401k versus a medical bill that costs more than your first car. Here's what I'm going to explain. How America accidentally turned citizenship into a subscription service you can't cancel, and why the only people who can afford to stay are the ones who don't need to. Think of it this way. You join a gym in 1975. It costs $20 a month. Great deal. You go for decades. But every year, they raise the price. First 30, then 50, then 100. By 2025, you're paying $300 a month. And here's the twist. The equipment is older, the pool is dirtier, and the guy at the front desk just shrugs when you complain. Oh, and you can't cancel your membership unless you pay an exit fee and fill out forms for a year. Now, other gyms in other countries are advertising. Same equipment, newer actually, $50 a month. But you've been going to this gym your whole life, your friends are here. Your family photo is on the wall from the 1980s. Leaving feels like betraying something. Until one day you do the math and realize loyalty is just another word for getting fleeced. In 2024, the average monthly Social Security payment was around $1,900. Sounds decent, right? Here's the problem. A 65-year-old who retired in 2025 can expect to spend $172,500 on healthcare throughout retirement, not total retirement costs, just healthcare. Medicare Part B premiums jumped from $185 a month in 2025 to $202.90 in 2026. That premium increase will consume 33% of the Social Security cost of living adjustment. So, you get a raise that doesn't even cover your mandatory health insurance increase. You worked for 40 years, and your reward is watching your fixed income get eaten alive by the one thing you can't opt out of, not dying. I know a guy, call him Robert, who taught high school history in Ohio for 32 years. Retired in 2023 with a pension and Social Security. Thought he'd made it. Then his wife needed a knee replacement. Even with Medicare, they paid $11,000 out of pocket. Their supplemental insurance didn't cover it fully because, and I love this, they went to a hospital that was in network, but the anesthesiologist was out of network. You can't make this up. Robert told me, I spent my whole career teaching kids about the New Deal, and now I'm learning it expired. He and his wife moved to Spain last year. They rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Valencia for 900 euros a month. His wife got her other knee done there for 3,000 euros. Total, no networks, no codes. She walked in, they fixed it, she walked out. Robert said the hardest part wasn't the language or the culture shock. It was realizing he'd been lied to for 3 decades about what he'd earned. Now, you might be thinking, but Medicare is supposed to cover this stuff. Yeah, about that. Here's where it gets really interesting. Future healthcare costs for an average 65-year-old with traditional Medicare could run as much as $281,000 for men and $320,000 for women. Those numbers include premiums and out-of-pocket costs, but they don't include dental or vision or hearing aids or long-term care. So if you have teeth, eyes, ears, or the audacity to age past 80, add more. The kicker? In 2022, more than 700,000 people received their Social Security checks abroad, up from less than 400,000 in 2000. That's not a trend. That's a stampede in slow motion. These aren't people abandoning America. They're people America priced out. Let's talk about the grocery store, because this is where the psychological break happens. I saw a story about a woman in Tampa who posted her receipt online. $298. 1 week of groceries. She wasn't buying lobster. She bought chicken, rice, vegetables, some fruit, coffee, basic stuff. Beef and veal prices increased by 13.9% in August 2025 compared to August 2024. Coffee prices have jumped more than 20% in the last year. You used to fill a cart and feel like you were taking care of your family. Now you fill a cart and feel like you're getting robbed at gunpoint, except the gunman is wearing a Kroger vest and saying, "Have a blessed day." But here's the really sick part. This isn't just inflation. The Consumer Price Index has risen 26% in the past 6 years. That's fine if your income also rose 26%. Did it? For most boomers on fixed income? No. So every year, you're effectively poorer. Not because you're spending more, because your money buys less. And the system is designed so you can't escape it. You can't boycott healthcare. You can't stop eating. You can't opt out of utilities. You're trapped in a burning building where the exit fee is renouncing your citizenship, and even then, the IRS follows you around with a clipboard. Cutaway number 1. Imagine you're at a restaurant. The waiter brings you a burger. You take a bite. It's cold. You complain. He says, "Well, it was hot when we made it in 2015. That's the American healthcare system explaining itself. The fourth escalation is the one nobody talks about because it sounds insane until you see the numbers. Experts predicted that by the end of 2025, the total number of Americans formally expatriating would reach 4,936. Even under conservative assumptions, the highest annual total since 2020. Those are the people who officially renounced citizenship. But hundreds of thousands more are just living abroad on long-term visas, collecting Social Security in Lisbon, Mexico City, Kuala Lumpur. They didn't renounce, they just stopped pretending the math works. And the kicker is this. A survey by Arton Capital found that 53% of American millionaires are more likely to leave the country after the 2024 presidential election, regardless of who wins. The rich are bailing, not because of taxes, they have accountants for that, because even they see the writing on the wall. When the people with the most resources to stay decide to leave, what does that tell you about the structural integrity of the building? Let me give you a concrete example. Meet Susan and Joe, real people. She worked in banking software in Florida, did well, retired early, could have stayed in the US comfortably. In 2015, they moved to Hungary. Not because Joe has roots there, though he does, but because the math was insane. Susan was put off by the increasingly high costs of housing and healthcare. And when they visited Hungary and looked at the affordable cost of living and slower pace of life, they decided almost on a whim to move. Now they own a home in the countryside, surrounded by vineyards. They spend winters in Spain. Susan said her biggest surprise wasn't the language barrier or the bureaucracy. It was how much better the quality of life was when you're not spending half your income on anxiety. She gardens, makes jam, travels. You know, the stuff retirement was supposed to be. In Florida, she was spending more on health insurance than her mortgage. In Hungary, she pays out of pocket for healthcare because it's cheaper than American insurance premiums. Let me say that again. Paying cash for medical care in Hungary is cheaper than paying for insurance in America. That's not a political statement. That's a systems failure. Here's the second cutaway. An American calls customer service for their health insurance. "I need to cancel my plan." The rep says, "You can't cancel. You have a pre-existing condition called being alive." Now, you might be thinking, but what about family? What about roots? Fair. That's the only real argument left. And it's a good one. But here's what I'm seeing. Boomers aren't just leaving. They're leaving first and then helping their kids follow. I've talked to dozens of people who moved abroad and then sponsored their adult children for visas because the next generation is looking at the same math and realizing it's worse. They're paying student loans America tells them to, buying houses America tells them they can't afford, and watching their paychecks get eaten by rent, healthcare, and groceries that cost twice what they did 5 years ago. The family argument only works if your family can afford to stay. Let me circle back to the hook. The American dream used to mean a house, a car, healthcare, and the belief your kids would do better than you. Now, the American dream is leaving America. That's not hyperbole. A recent Business Insider article explores how Americans, especially baby boomers, are seeking out lower cost countries like Spain and Ecuador to afford a better quality of life in retirement. The people who built this country, who paid into the system, who believed the contract was real, are now being told the fine print says they're on their own and they're making a rational decision. They're voting with their feet. So here are 3 practical takeaways. Not generic advice, real moves. First, if you're even considering leaving, start researching visa requirements now. Portugal has a D7 visa for retirees. Spain has a non-lucrative visa. Mexico has a temporary resident visa you can renew indefinitely. Don't wait until you're desperate. The paperwork takes months, sometimes years. Second, run the numbers cold, not emotionally. Take your current monthly expenses. Compare them to the same expenses in 3 countries you'd actually consider. Include healthcare, rent, food, utilities. Costa Rica is roughly 30% less expensive than the average US city. If you're spending $4,000 a month in the US, you might spend $2,800 in Costa Rica with better healthcare and weather. That's $14,400 a year. Over 20 years, $288,000. That's a different retirement. Third, test it. Rent a place abroad for 3 months. Not a vacation, live there. Buy groceries. See a doctor. Deal with the bureaucracy. If you hate it, you're out 3 months and some plane tickets. If it works, you just bought yourself a decade of financial breathing room. The cynical truth nobody wants to say, America works great if you're rich. If you're not, it's a subscription service that keeps raising the price while cutting the features. And the boomers who are leaving aren't quitters. They're just the first ones who did the math.